It isn't every day you get a wow moment watching ESPN looking at a piece of tape. Hello, everybody, with my Hall of Fame friend, Dick Hoops Weiss. Hoops, how are you?
I'm great, Alan. I a little problem with my computer last night, but we're hanging in there.
Yeah,
Happy to be doing the show with you.
I am too, because I can share at least this part without giving away a trade secret. You're writing another book and your computer went down because of your cell phone
Uh,
service, and God forbid you lost
yeah,
your book.
definitely one of the worst days of my life, but it happens. This is the worst thing to happen to me. I'll be fine.
It's a blessing. Okay, Hoops, I got to hear your reaction. So Krzyzewski retires, which we're going to talk about it, and that's fine. And boom, the second I see Mike Krzyzewski, I start laughing, and I burst out loud. I bet you're like me. I actually saw Krzyzewski play when he was at Army and the captain with the high shorts. Great player. I mean, he got whatever he could at. So I've watched him forever. You have too, right?
Yep.
There was a first when he retired. He had gray hair. I've never seen him with gray hair. He's 74 years old, and 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 by the way, I respect the heck out of him. So somebody from Duke is going to take this the wrong way. Does he put shoe polish on his hair every week or whatever it is? Who can be?
You know what? I
74
should
for
stay.
all those
I
years and
should,
not have any
I
gray
should stay
hair?
out of this conversation, big boy. But I'll tell you one thing: he had to live through a lot of stress last year.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure he did not expect to be 11-11 after the regular season. I'm sure he didn't expect one of his star players, Jalen Johnson, to leave. I'm sure he didn't expect to get into it with a student reporter. I'm sure he didn't expect to have three different 3-game losing streaks. I'm sure he didn't expect his freshman to take that long to fit into the program. By the end of the year, they were actually a fairly competitive team once they put Mark Williams in there.
Right.
But they struggled badly in both games against Carolina.
And you and I have talked about this. The first time I saw Mark Williams, I didn't even know he was on the team. I'm going, oh my gosh, he's really good. Why is this kid not playing? A 7-footer that's that athletic? That drove me crazy.
Yep. I mean, he's going to be a pro. I mean, look, I think it's pretty obvious that anybody with pro aspirations will probably play for K this year and leave at the end of the season. Okay. And by that, I mean Mark Williams, probably Pancho Banchero, maybe even AJ Griffin, the two freshmen that are coming in. I could see all three of them becoming declaring either after one and done. And the only reason Mark Williams waited until his sophomore year is because he didn't get any minutes.
Well, aren't you surprised, though, that this is the first time we've seen sprinkles of gray in his hair as much as I saw?
He's ready for retirement. That's his retirement look.
Yeah, good for him, by the way. So let me ask you this question. I'm going to give you a quote that's attributed to Adolph Rupp, and then I'm going to tell you the player, okay? Now, I can't swear this is true, but I've heard the story directly from the person that was almost word for word anyway. So If it's not a direct quote from my research, it's a paraphrase. Quote, well, by God, if you want to play at the normal school, that's fine with me. But I can tell you this, the university will not cancel its basketball schedule because you're gone. Now, that was supposedly Adolph Rupp to a consensus, not one, not two, but 3-time All-American Ralph Beard when he was thinking about leaving because he couldn't handle Rupp. Okay, can you imagine in today's world a coach having the guts to tell that to a player because the player would walk out? Players have power now. I found this quote by Rupp and I started laughing. Rupp couldn't coach today. You got to re-recruit your team. And I think that's one of the reasons, and you believe this too, that's why Roy Williams might have left. Do you think that's why one of the reasons why Coach K is leaving?
Well, I'll tell you what, basketball is going through some seismic changes. I thought it was interesting when Mike said, well, we've been through a lot of different changes in basketball. Well, most of them, were good for the game, the three-point shot, the shot clock. These are radical changes. The transfer portal, the one and done, Um, it's really hard to create roster management. And frankly, it's really hard to know who's going to be in your team next year if you choose to recruit 5-star players, because most of them don't intend to be in school more than 1 year.
I'm
Look,
gonna throw this at you, and then we're gonna get off Duke and the gray
yeah,
hair.
we
Let me throw this at you. If and I bet you agree with this. If John Shire has a great recruiting year for next year, because he's not a lead recruiter for himself, not the lead recruiter for Coach K. If he has a bad recruiting year, his job is going to be in trouble so quick, even though he's a Dookie, he's going to be in trouble so quick, it's not even funny.
look, very few coaches have been able to make the transition when they follow in the footsteps of an iconic coach. I mean, we are watching a lot of these super coaches who have been with programs 20 years and up, starting to get to their late 60s, early 70s. When they walk away, I don't think we're ever going to have that again. I think this job takes too much out of you. I think it's a young person's job. I think recruiting is a lot harder than it used to be, Alan.
Nonstop recruiting. You got to re-recruit your team. You got to try to keep your players, and then you got to get transfers in. I mean, I wonder how much extra time a guy like Calipari or whoever has to spend recruiting.
Well, you know what? There are some schools that are actually talking about putting a guy in their staff as a transfer portal guy. Period. I mean, some members of the staff will recruit freshmen. Some members will recruit transfers. The biggest problem, Alan, is this year you can have as many players as you want on your roster. Next year it goes back to 13. A lot of schools are going to have more players than they have scholarships, and you're going to have to make a lot of decisions. That's why I think a lot of coaches this year didn't recruit as many incoming freshmen, because they don't know, they haven't figured out how to negotiate the transfer portal. I think freshman recruiting was only 75% of what it used to be last year, and I would expect that to continue for 2 or 3 years, because you have all these super seniors that decide they're going to come back and play because the NCAA gave everybody a free year.
You know, let's amplify what you're saying, and I can see that happening. The assistant just looks at potential kids that will leave, that they're going to scour the OVCs of the world and the smaller leagues of the world to look at their best players who are averaging 14, 15, 16 points a game that are juniors, saying, you know, I want to go somewhere else. I mean, and you don't think, wink, wink, that some schools will have a third party reach out to somebody at a smaller school and say, you know, how would you like to come to blank school? I think there's going to be more cheating than ever before with that kind of thing.
Listen, I think it's pretty naive to think otherwise. I'll tell you another thing. I think the best player on mid-major teams, particularly if they're freshmen, are more likely to leave. I think that if you want experience and you want to stay old, you can recruit that way. But I think that a lot of these schools are going to look at the freshman class and make a decision on whether they can play at the next level up, and they're going to cherry pick.
Okay, this is your stat. I think it's amazing. You did the research and you said that, make sure I have this right. If not, please correct me. 47% of the college head coaches that were hired in Division One in this offseason were African American, which is by far the most ever. One, did I have that right? And two, let's talk about the change in college basketball that I think most people haven't realized.
Well, it is true. And I think that what we're discovering is that the black athlete, who makes up at least 56% of the rosters in Division One basketball, has found his voice in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And they are out there, they're talking, become much more political. I think that there is a lot of pressure from Black Coaches Associations being placed on high level administrators to have much more diversity in their athletic program. And the one school and the one program that seems to be benefiting from that is men's college basketball. It hasn't hit um, football yet. I mean, for some reason, the old boys network is still in play there. But I do believe that there is much more pressure than ever before to bring a black coach in uh, if he's qualified. And I think that more schools are actually looking at it. If you look at the east of Mississippi, if you look at the SEC, the Big Ten, um, the Big East, the Atlantic 10, almost all of these new hires uh, are black coaches, and look, they probably should have gotten an opportunity to do this 5 years ago,
See
but it
that,
didn't happen.
that's my point. I couldn't agree with you more. Because of the political atmosphere, coaches who should have received opportunities in the past are now only getting them. So it's an odd way through pressure to have some progress in college basketball.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of the coaches that are being hired are young coaches without head coaching experience, but some of them are lifers, like Tony Stubblefield, who had been in the business 27 years before he got an opportunity to coach at DePaul.
Well, I had some people tell me about 15 years ago that Stubberfield would make a good head coaching candidate. That was a long time ago. And I don't know him personally, but I know some people that know him. So that would amplify what you're saying. People that probably should have had an opportunity a long time ago are only getting it now because of pressure.
Well, and I think that the fact that Dwayne Peavy is the new athletic director at DePaul didn't hurt because his connections, his strong connections with George Raveling and John Calipari, who are both big Tony Stubblefield people, and I guarantee that they both recommended him as a potential candidate for that job.
Okay, I got to ask you one Duke question. We're doing too much Duke, but I think a lot of people will be surprised at your answer. Forget about John Shire for a second, who's taking over. And by the way, I will always believe if he didn't have the eye problem, he would have played in the NBA as probably a backup forever. He thought he was a really, really good player, but he had the eye problem. Neither here nor there. Were there people who didn't want the Duke job?
I think there were. I honestly believe that there was a lot of push after Carolina hired Hubert Davis for Duke to hire a black coach. I think that they probably at least looked at both Johnny Dawkins and Tommy Amaker, who are members of the family, for that job. They are both exceptional people as well as good coaches. Probably could have filled the position, but I'm not sure if either one wanted it. Tommy's got a great job at Harvard. He's probably one of the five most financially secure people there. And I don't. I think John looked at that job and said, "Do I want to be the guy who follows in the footprints of Mike Krzyzewski?" We all saw what happened with Wooden. They've gone through 8 coaches and they still haven't found the answer.
And you know what? When Cal leaves, you wonder if the same thing might happen. We don't know
I
yet.
don't
But
know. I would say this: he's going to have to win more than one championship for people to say that.
the pressure on Cal this year, I think, will be bigger, much bigger than ever before. Yes or no?
Yeah, because he's never had a bad season,
Yeah.
and Kentucky fans are incredibly loyal. They're incredibly rabid, but they also like the idea of having a team in the Final Four. And I'm not sure whether they want to go 5, 6 years without having one. Now they could have had one in 17. They were good, actually good enough to win the national championship, but they ended up losing at the buzzer to Carolina in the regional finals. That was a good Kentucky team. That was a team with Adebayo and Monk and Fox, but they have not been to a Final Four since 15. John got there in 2009, 2010. He went 4 times between 11 and 15, he hasn't been back.
This team could be good enough to potentially get to the Final Four, and they might not finish in the top 3 in the Southeastern Conference because how strong the SEC on paper is today. Do you agree?
It's no longer just a football league, Alan. I mean, you have multiple teams with potential top 25 resumes. I mean, I think Alabama, LSU, Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida all have nationally competitive teams.
You know, it's interesting, and they're not going to win the championship. They might not make the top 25. But Mississippi State, that gets no pub, they did really good in the transfer market. I mean, they're a team that if you think you can go down there and win, you're in trouble.
I was stunned, by the way, when Garrison Brooks signed there. He was a fifth-year kid. Most people thought he might come back to Carolina. He not only transfers, but he goes to Starkville to play for Ben Hallen. I happen to think Ben Hallen was a very good coach when he was at UCLA. Took 3 straight teams to a Final Four between 2006, 2008. And, you know, the kid probably feels he can learn from him, but he was willing to make the shift, and you know he'll be a factor with that team. I mean, they recruited 3 players who are pretty good and could definitely all be starters on an upper tier SEC team.
Okay, so my thing with Kentucky is they've gone from not having enough players not that long ago to maybe having too many, and I think Cal won't be able to dish out playing time to keep his players happy, at least some of them, and players leave more now than ever before, and I think it's possible. Now, some people say, Cutler, you're stirring up stuff. No, it's possible that some of these guys are not going to want to stay here because they're not going to get the playing time they think they deserve because he's got too many players now. And as we're doing this, we don't know if Mintz is coming back. You can't have proper minutes for some of these guys that came in and expected to play.
Well, think about it. After they added Fredericks and Ty Washington to the guard line and Kellen Grady, they now have 3 guards to go with Dante Allen. They're going to have to find some way to get playing time for all 4. And I'll be frank, I don't know that Mintz is coming back. He has to look at the numbers game and make a decision. Does he come back and play and want to be part of a lesser role? I don't know. The point is that John can go too deep at every position now, and he has legitimate players. Look, I don't know what's going to happen to the kid Brooks. I'm sure when he came back originally, he felt I'll probably play, but now you got to transfer from West Virginia. Now you got Damian Collins coming in from Atlanta, Texas.
Who has to play?
Yeah, who has to play. So my initial thought is John will play 3 guards next year and 2 bigs because I think the game is based on spreading the floor. And unlike last year, he has guys that can make shots.
Amen, Hoops. Amen, Hoops. Because that's my thing. Play 3 guards, run, proper spacing, and this could be a wonderful team. One of the things that drives me nuts about Cal, that I don't know how many times I'm sitting courtside with 4 minutes to go and Kentucky's up by 8-10, whatever, and he slows it down. And the other team makes it closer. And I can't tell you how many press conferences I've been to through the years where he said, you got to know how to grind it out because you can't win 6 games in the NCAA tournament without grounding it out. I know he's a Hall of Fame coach, and I'm just an old guy with white hair. Krzyzewski's going to catch up to me. There's no question about it. But my thing is run at every opportunity, and when the defense doesn't allow you to run, which is going to happen, then grind it out. Until then, step on their throats, and Cal doesn't do it, and it drives me crazy, and he's got all these shooters now. I mean, they could spread the court. They could play offense like Utah. Oh, my gosh, did I mention a former Dookie who was their head coach? The best offense in the NBA right now is Utah with their spacing. There's no doubt about it. And if Kentucky would use the spacing that Utah does and run like crazy with the three guards, they could be spectacular and fun to watch.
Oh, I think they will. I think they will be fun to watch as long as they don't play not to lose. I think
Right.
one of the biggest problems with last year's team occurred in the last 4 minutes when things would tend to go off the rail. They started getting worried about possessions and scoring in possessions and making three throws. It was not a team, Alan, that uh, was very confident down the stretch in a lot of big games.
I agree, but I think with the different players, that'll be different. But I've seen
Oh,
very,
I listen. They have made unbelievable changes for the better with the two freshmen and the four transfers they brought in.
Cal has reinvented himself, which is all part of coaching. But I
Yeah,
still
which I
say
think
that
is great.
this league is so tough
I
now.
mean, it's what amazes me. We haven't even talked about the guard from Georgia. He's going to have to play too. Wheeler.
You're
I
right.
mean, he's second team All SEC. I mean, so I'll tell you one thing: the practices will be interesting, but I'll be interested to take a hard look at the amount of minutes each of these guards get.
Me too. But he's got to play three guards. If he doesn't
Yep,
play three
that will
guards,
help.
and you know what?
That will help. Look, they're going to be a lot better next year. I just think that when I look at their personnel next year relative to the personnel they had this year, now I'm sure that when John took SAR last year, he was hoping he'd have games like he did in the ACC where he had 35 against Notre Dame. That never happened this year, and he was in constant foul trouble. I think he thought that Boston and Clark would be lottery picks. It didn't
Yeah,
happen.
right.
And I think he thought he could manufacture a point guard, and that didn't happen until they moved him into that position.
Well,
At,
I look at it this way.
so it was a struggle finding people for positions and getting quality minutes out of the players on the roster.
Yeah, I was surprised how poor of a season SAR had. The freshmen not being acclimated and not doing the weights in the summer and those kinds of things I could understand. But SAR was an old guy. Okay, one more topic I want to throw at you. Jay Billis, I don't know him personally, just saying that. I think he's wonderful on TV, so I'm going to say it up front. Has put out a list of the top 10 point guards of all time. I'm going to read the list quickly. Want your reaction, and you know how I feel about this, and this drives me nuts. He's got Magic 1, Isaiah Thomas 2, Calvin Murphy 3, Jason Kidd 4, Phil Ford 5, Bobby Hurley 6, Chris Paul 7, John Lucas 8, Allen Iverson 9, Gary Payton 10. Thoughts?
Well, that means that no one who played before 1975 was any good. I mean,
And that drives me crazy.
last time I checked, Oscar Robertson was a triple double guy. I know before you mentioned Ralph Beard from Kentucky, who was a three-time All American. There were some really good players in college basketball back then, and there were players who transcended time. Look at Tom Gola. He was Magic before Magic. He could play all five positions.
Yep.
There were a lot of really good players. Now, maybe they didn't shoot the ball as well as these guys, but they were incredibly productive in a high-scoring game. And in the league itself, there were only 8 teams, so you had to be really good just to make a roster.
Well, Beard was a consensus, which means first team All-American, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And he kept a guy named Bob Cousy, one of the greatest of all time, from being a consensus All-American. But, it's my thing. Otto Graham is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but he was never on ESPN. Nobody mentions him in the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. And in my opinion, he absolutely is when you saw how he won and what he did. And it drives me nuts that these lists, people only know from when they were born instead of looking at the history.
That is true. There's no sense of historical perspective. You mentioned Bob Cousy. I mean, how much? I mean, they named an award after him in the Hall of Fame. He was that good. I
Point
mean,
guard award.
yeah, the point guard award. Yes.
And Ralph Beard. Now, I talked to old timers a long time ago because I heard stories about this game. I made a bunch of phone calls and I talked to guys. Apparently, when they went head on head, Beard totally shut down Kuzi. Nobody talks, and I get because of the scandal that might be part of it, and I understand
It's
that. But it's also
in
this
a
was the
way,
1940s.
it's a shame in a way that those guys never got a chance to play in the NBA. People make mistakes in college, and unfortunately, in this case, it came back to haunt him for the rest of his life. Who knows how good he would have been if he played in the league?
Yeah, and he played a little bit in the league. He was actually one of the owners of the team in Indianapolis, and they made
Indianapolis.
him sell the team for 10% of its worth. And then he was told he couldn't even play pickup basketball at Kentucky. He couldn't even go try to play baseball, which he was also really good at. And the guy, Ralph Beard, was, I know we're getting on a Ralph Beard tangent. He was all-state in 4 sports.
That's amazing.
Came to Kentucky to play football. When he told me the story when I was inside his house, I went, oh my gosh. He was 160 pounds soaking wet. Okay. He came to play football. He was a fullback. The first play from scrimmage in his first practice, he dislocated both shoulders. And then he became a basketball player full time. 160 pounds to
Well,
play
at
fullback for
least he
Bear
was
Bryant.
smart.
I mean, that's
You know,
one
and
of the
back then you had to play 2 ways.
Right. Right. And by the way,
So
he admitted to taking the $700. He gave the money to his mother. He said he never actually cheated in a game. I believe him. And by the way, the game in which he is accused of taking the money, which he didn't deny in cheating, he actually scored more than his average. And so,
well, you know, I mean, the problem they had was they were winning the games. They just weren't winning by enough.
right.
I don't think he ever threw a game to lose it. But I think that during that period of time, the players were trying to keep the score under. And there were 2 games. The second game, apparently, they tried and they lost.
That's
I mean,
correct.
the guys that fixed the game did not win. And I guess it was an ex-football player who was trying to put this together. And then he dropped out completely. But they got nailed for those 2 games.
Absolutely. But Beard swears in that game where they lost, there were other teammates who were keeping it down, but he said he didn't. We don't know, but I always believe Ralph Beard.
You know what? Who knows? I just know that basketball lost a great player when he couldn't
absolutely. And a man who his whole life was basketball and thought about committing suicide, and then remarried again, and his wife Betty saved his life.
Yeah, you know, happy to hear it. But you know, there's a guy who is the classic face of Kentucky basketball under Rupp, and people don't know how good he was.
Yes.
But again, you know, I hate it when people do lists who are 25 and have no idea about the past.
Drives me crazy. By the way, one more quick thing about Ralph Beard. Bobby Knight introduced Ralph Beard to his people when he was coaching as the Michael Jordan of his time.
Wow. That's
a pretty good quote.
I never heard
that. Yeah,
I never.
That's pretty good. And he was lightning quick. Hoops, between now and the start of the season, is any other coach going to drop out because of all the stuff that's going on? You think all the retirements have already happened?
Oh, I think Roy Williams and Kay are probably the biggest. Lon Kruger, probably the biggest names to probably walk away from the game this year. I would say this: there are a lot of coaches coaching now in their late 60s and 70s. You know, so you don't know how much longer they're going to coach, Alan.
Last comment. We just lost Hoops. Okay, I was going to ask him for one last thing. I'll just throw it out there. I believe that the ACC won't be the best league, the second best league, the third best league, probably not the fourth best league. We will see. Hoops, thank you so much. Mike Krzyzewski with gray in his hair. Times have changed. Have a great day.